Good morning. This is the December verse virtual reading with Margo Berdeshevsky and Rick Barrett and an open mic. And we welcome you, whether you're here or listening later on the recording, to tune in. And it's always a terrific time. We're going to start this morning with Margo Berdeshevsky. She was born in New York City and now lives in Paris. Her newest book is Kneel, Said the Night, which was published by Sundress Publications. Her recent collection, Before the Drought, was released by Glasslear Press, and she was a finalist for the National Poetry Series. It is Still Beautiful to Hear the Heartbeat is forthcoming from Salmon Poetry. Author as well of Between Soul and Stone and But a Passage in Wilderness, and her book of illustrated stories, Beautiful Soon Enough. Recipient of the 2022 Grand Prize for Thomas Merton Poetry of the Sacred Award and the Robert H. Winter Award from the Poetry Society of America. I'll put her website in the chat, and you can check it out while she's reading. So take it away, Margo.
Greetings. Hello to you, Rick. I'm so glad to be joining with you. And thank you, Robbi, for introducing me and inviting me. Let's get started. Yes, these are starting to be scary days. But I'm going to begin at the ending and read the last poem from my next book, It Is Still Beautiful to Hear the Heartbeat. And it begins, what I will read is the last poem from that forthcoming book, an untitled prayer. In the land of afterwards, may we remember the poetry of almost, the large animals who never forget, the sand of our first imprint, its infant step. In the land of before, may the infant's first turning be toward grass, its insistence on green, the leaf, its awareness of falling, scarlet and broken but ready. In the land of our new fear, may I remember yours and the winter's remarkable determination to sleep until April. It ends with an epigraph by Adrienne Rich. I came to explore the wreck. And this is the title poem from Kneel, Said the Night. Kneel, said the night. I sell mirrors in the city of the blind, Kabir. Kneel, said the night, her full paunch moon, mute as I am. Ask for words, said the night, instead, a turning autumn path, where the shepherd and his dog lead their X-marked flock, where morning's cry is 100 made single bleat, made soon 1,000 dry-leaf whispers, made sunrise to its lover the breeze. The lambs and sheep are extra killing, hurry their soiled white woolen bodies as one toward sun. Slaughter ahead, but not yet. And my own marked tongue, like a taut wound watch, ticks trees, ticks bodies, ticks the veiled and the beheaded, ticks presidents, ticks light, ticks stain I cannot say or bend, ticks last year's dead, ticks this year's dead, this morning's mute as a moon killed. The lambs will be meat before any plea is answered. The reddening forest can hear, urges syllables like breath to a fire, can speak to leaf, lamb, path, moss, stone. It can. Then I can. Land, I mouth, hill of the dead, as if a voice I have heard of ancient bones unearthed mere roads away from here. Skeleton of sounds. Poem. Kneel, said the night. Kneel with me now, with the slaughtered sheep, in case there may be any reply. In solidarity with Ukraine and Gaza and Lebanon and all other lands and humans exed for killing. All night, please. Once I called her the darkness. Now I call her eclipse me, half a sky me, child me, nipples hot with midlight, nightlit me, where the dark of a pulsar shimmers like a baby burning, as though a soul were an egg, a breadfruit, a plum, so full, so ripe, so ready to be injured by falling. But say I find faith. No, say a volcano's silver sword stabs my sleep. No, say guardian, its charred descent, its white split-tailed birds diving. Say goddess of ash, say ash of kiss, say ebbing courage even when prayer, and what is that? Has a star's clack of visible radiation. Please, say I'm a good girl, still. Say spider's sticky gray threads are all the strings inside my skin, and that child I am wants to say thank you to someone. Still, infested heart, go away, go home, fall, get out of my heart. I will lie with the only lover left, sky, double ringed, led by its tiny chain across the sudden black ecliptic, and a golden ring to protect it. I've married myself now. Dressed me in my skimpy gown, cleaned inside my bones with steel brushes, hid from dogs in the bed, while my own eclipse is a solarized star, crossed out by moon, dropped between my woman's sway and burden. There my hermit's candle, and nipples flamed, like all surfaces I can fracture. No neutron vast percussions imitating gardens of time. No, summer's first clean white nights will come, still, and still twice the gardeners heard. Still the child I am wants to say thank you to someone, please. Say star, say eclipse, say I am a good child in the dark, all night, still, please. Here is my body, invisible on our lake, our dreamscape, the old blue heron lands. Beak of my hunger, beak of her hunger, beak of her mothering, mother me, I say. I'm her body of surrender, waiting. I'm her body of hunger, waiting. Her body of danger, waiting under the 5 million starfall night. Mother, I cry, you promised kinder streams. You promised sleep. Be kind, you said, before you surrendered, before you climbed the starfall. This night won't last, you said. I'm the heron, I'm the lake at peace. Our vine leads to you, you said. your body of surrender waiting. I whisper, the blue heron will feed us. Blue dawn will delete us. Peace, our bodies will sleep, our danger will sleep. I will love you, you said. That was my promise before. Our lake waits. Don't cry, I said. Here is my body, I said. Sleep. The hungry beaks will feed. Even sparrows, winged ones. Our old promise is kept this night. This dangerous last mothering us night. Some of you know that this weekend has been a rebirth for the ancient cathedral in Paris, Notre Dame. A cathedral like the phoenix that hovers on her steeple will be reborn. But 5 springtimes ago, many, including myself, watched as she burned. The motto of the city of Paris was and still is, she is rocked by the waves, but does not sink. For us, again. While the branch erupts in pale pink infant tongues, and we want to thank mothers and Marys and God and relics, even as we howl against a rotting worldly spring, and that nailed sun, his father's eye, on some other sparrow maybe, could not stop the rising. Here our old Parisian lady, shell of 1,000 prayers, her squat stone body, fronted with budding pinks, has knelt for 100 springs, bends now to one sudden flame, then furnace, turning her bones to ash. Here blaze cracks her spire to lucent skeleton, but not her spine, and not her relic, one rescued crown of thorns. But this day she's a body still, but a holy shell, half saved by heroes. This day, what is sacred can be killed and killed again. A scaffold not of April, but of angry rapture, lit ahead of Holy Week, weary but repeated words for love nailed to the ironwood once, under that blackout sun, that terrified noon's crossed man. Now flame tongues whip the Paris lady's crown, hungry at their hot meat, but spare her fronting lace of budding trees, but spread, hover, hurt, break, and match our thousand fears. Symbols can die. As the poet warned us, some say the world will end in fire, some say in ice. Notre Dame can burn like other worlds ahead of any Sunday resurrection. And the cherry branches will insist on flowering as though April and her scorched cathedral under this dusk's late sun had not paused or known. And I'd end with a chazal. It begins with a small epigraph from National Geographic. Handprints in ancient cave art were left by women. If the new animal voice cries for my empty bed, hear me. If a wide red wing climbing my cotton gown stills me, hear me. If wars and blue tongues of the night, scarved crows admit what our mothers pretend to forget, will you hear me? When wild horsemen sketched beastmen, drawn by girls afraid to tell secrets to their mothers, filled caves, did you hear me? secrets spread in menstrual reds on a cave's inner walls. Did the hills listen? Did you hear me? My bed of old bloods has slept through dreams and revenants. One sky's thickened milk fills silence. Hear me, silk-tongued as that hour ahead of our last summers. Leaves, handprints, tears the riddles open. Hear me, if the smallest hands, if the last birds, if one unborn poem spills just a little sky, we were not killed, we're born. Mother, hear me. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that lovely set of poems. Our second feature this morning is Rick Barrett, and we now have assembled a few people here, although it's not a very long open mic, and might make it a bit longer. Rick Barrett was born in the Philippines and grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area. His fourth book of poems, The Galleons, was published by Milkweed Editions and was longlisted for the National Book Award. His earlier collections, including The Darker Fall, Want, and Cord, were all published by Sarabande Books. Cord received the UNT Rilke Prize, the Penn Open Book Award, and the Publishing Triangle's Tom Gunn Award. His work has appeared in numerous publications, including Poetry, the Kenyon Review, and the New Yorker. He's received fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the NEA, and Stanford University. He lives in Tacoma, Washington, and directs the Rainier Writing Workshop, the low residency MFA program in creative writing at Pacific Lutheran University. His newest book of poems is Moving the Bones, and it was published by Milkweed Editions in 2024. Take it away, Rick.
Thank you so much, Robbi. And what a pleasure to be reading with Margo. And thanks to all of you for being here today. I think especially now, any chance to be in community with other poets is a wonderful thing. And so I'm really grateful for this space. And I'm really looking forward to hearing your poems as well. I'm excited to be promoting, I'm going to flash the cover of it, this book here, which Robbi mentioned. It came out in October. And I'm going to be reading poems from that book. And I'm going to start with the opening poem in the book, which is called Pleasure. Pleasure. You are told to believe in one paradise, and then there's the paradise you come to know. The shoes lined up in pairs by the door, and the herd moving with its mysterious intent across a dark plain. The blue of the sky, which is the zenith of all colors, and the love of the man in the next room, strong and rough as a hog's back. My mind has a slow metabolism. It is slow to understand what anything means, but it understands that if you look at something long enough, it will have something to say to you. The sun that is strangely bright on some days, like a poisoned canary, and the crop of winter rocks thrown up in a meadow in April. Learning decades later the name of the hospital where you were born, and watching the child eat a mango as though it is time he is eating, time shining on his lips. On fewer days, I agree with the poet who dreaded being the wrong person in the right world. And I believe in adhesion, in never showing up empty-handed, even if the pleasure I know best is fused with the abject. There's always the other side of the heart. It's coaxing. You are here. You can begin again. You can rise. So the middle section of this new book is comprised of 30 prose poems titled During the Pandemic. And I don't know what your pandemic experience was like, but for me, it was one of isolation and dread. And these poems are trying to capture the dynamics of that. So I'm going to read just a handful of these pandemic poems, and each one starts with the phrase during the pandemic. So that's when you know that I will have started a new poem. During the pandemic. During the pandemic, I thought of abstract art. Abstract art, the art historian claimed, was the most democratic kind of art because it allowed for anyone's interpretations, anyone's feelings. You didn't have to know anything to get it. For instance, the canvas that was painted uniformly black could be open-ended and be a consensus at the same time, like a plague. During the pandemic, I watched the weather. The sky brought forth its clean clouds. The trees put forth their green like store awnings. You could go online and look at places in every weather. I loved best the weather that was ours. Rain that felt so hard, it sounded like a crowd. Ours, like a postcard in the mail or the sparklers on a cake. It was spring. It was a rash season. Then there was the sun on everything. The architect said, the sun never knew how great it was until it hit the side of a building. During the pandemic, I fixed on each fear. Each fear was its own fastidiousness. My mother and her fear of the ocean, not even a touch of it, not even her feet in the tender edge of surf. My friend and his fear of tunnels, the tunnels he went through with his eyes closed. When we went outside, we wore latex gloves, the colors of Easter. We stood apart in the mandated distance, like the remaining pieces at the end of a game of chess. During the pandemic, I kept a list of possible symptoms on the refrigerator door. From a distance, it looked like a shopping list, an ersatz normalcy. Fever instead of flour, cough instead of bacon, fatigue instead of milk. With each day, the slippages proliferated. Hospital instead of hospitality, projections instead of protections, virus instead of virtue. Asymptomatic veered towards asymptote, an intimate infinity between them. During the pandemic, I looked out the window at the moment a runner went by. His stride had an exaggerated beauty, like everything that was outside of my mind. The blue recycling dumpster, the white cereal bowl, the pink full moon. Inside my mind was woe, an attic full of gray insulation. During the pandemic, I knew we were in a period of interval, so I considered what an interval meant. The interval we were in was not like swinging in a hammock on a warm afternoon. It was not like making a lesson plan to be taught. It was not even like being inside a car wash and its cleansing tempest. It was more like lucky speech in the middle of Beckett's play, its torrent of rage and grief, after which the waiting, which was the point after all, resumed. During the pandemic, I read a book about glaciation in the Pacific Northwest. I read a book about a composer's life, the agony that was each of his symphonies. I read a book about moss. Every book was basically about time. I meticulously dusted the leaves of my houseplant with a tissue. This gesture was one kind of time. I imagined where I stood as it would have been 15,000 years ago, the glacier a mile high in thickness. This was another kind of time. I imagined the ice traveling through its geology in a luminous, round enclosure, as though the past were science fiction. During the pandemic, I wanted to take up as little space as possible. Wake, wash, eat, clean, watch, lie. I wanted my habits reduced to a ritual of monosyllables. The painter said, "A skull is a beautiful structure and used to waiting." I admired the painter's suave severity, that grim style. Now that isolation and obedience were what I knew of refuge. During the pandemic, I thought of scale. Pandemics, I read, had shaped human history from the start, like lava scorching an old landscape with regularity. This was one kind of scale. The tweet from the man announcing his wife's death from the virus was another kind of scale. Soft, the size of my face, the mask I wore to the store was one kind of scale. The racist violence being done to people who looked like me, this was another kind of scale. A scholar wrote, "The poem is a speech of citizenship," and I laughed. During the pandemic, I couldn't distinguish between solitude and loneliness, between trivia and news, between restraint and prohibition. I went to the empty track of the high school and felt as a mending, walking around in circles. The gulls above looked like scissors. I thought of how we thought of nature as an infinity. This was part of the calamity. Just a couple more of these pandemic poems. During the pandemic, I went outside as into an abstraction. Every body a vector, every public space a possible inflection point, the very air a moral injury. But there was no abstracting this. The bus driver died, the shoemaker, the chef, the playwright, the nurses and the doctors, the ambassador, the princess, the leader of the band, the scholar of Derrida. During the pandemic, I praised the cherry blossoms. I praised my lungs. I praised crying. I praised the faces of my students checkerboarded on the computer screen. I praised the curses I gave to those who deserve them. I praised coffee. I praised ventilators. I praised the people gathered on the rooftop of a nearby building, laughing as they looked up at the night sky. So those are some of those prose poems from the pandemic sequence. And there are 30 of those because I wrote the sequence in April of 2020, and I wanted to write a poem per day. So that's what happened. And it's worth mentioning as well, this might be interesting to all of you, I wrote those poems all on the Notes app of my phone. They started out as just jottings of imagery and language that came to me during those really painful spring days. And so I just went ahead and wrote all of those poems using the Notes app, not really thinking that I was going to write prose poems, but for those of you who have written maybe things on your Notes app, it's hard to lineate in there. So that's why they became prose poems, because the Notes app in a way demanded that they be so. So I'm going to close up by reading the title poem for this book. And the title poem is called Moving the Bones. Moving the Bones. There are too many ancestors, so we are gathering their bones. The poor ones, their graves broken by the roots of trees. The ones whose headstones have been weathered as blank as snowdrifts. We have bought the wide plot. We have built the mausoleum. And now we fill it with the bones. The ones killed in the monsoon floods. The one buried in her wedding dress. The one buried with his medals. Because there will be a time when we cannot keep track of them, scattered in the cemetery like prodigals, we collect the bones. The ones whose faces I can still recall, the ones who have been dead for 100 years, we collect their bones. At each opened grave, we think about the body taking its shape as father, sister, cousin, uncle. We hunger for the story of each figure. We hold the bones, though we know memory is mostly forgetting, or memory is the sweeper who clears the sidewalk each morning, or memory is the room. The mausoleum is marble, white as certain roses, and shaped like a house. There is room for everyone we will put there. The rich ones, their gravestones glowing with gold paint. The infants with sweet names. We open their graves, we move their bones. Look back far enough, and your family becomes unfamiliar, a circle of people with a fading circumference. When I think of it long enough, home becomes a confusion of birthplace, hometown, country, and nation. We walk through the cemetery, we point to our own, and we gather their bones. Maybe memory is the desperate pharaoh who commands that the things of this life go with him into the next. I would take with me the books I love best, a jar of the ocean spanning my two countries, a slip of my lover's sunny hair. I would take with me a sack of rice, my mother's orange shawl, the robe my father wears in the kitchen at night, drinking a glass of water, that we might go to just one place to worship them, to wonder at who they were. We are moving the bones. Our tribe of eros and vinegar, our black hair, our ordinary minds. Holding the bones, we say the names of the dead, the music of the syllables, conjuring the hearts they answered to. We hold the bones, each stern skull, each proud sternum, each elegant rib, curved like a horizon. Thank you all so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Rick, for those wonderful poems. And as I said in the chat here, I thank you for reading about the pandemic. I think people have turned away from that experience and refused to acknowledge it and thrown out the work that they wrote about those things. Even I have thrown out some because no one wants it. And so I'm very glad that you are asking us to revisit that experience. And I hope people will respond to that by reading some of their own comments on the pandemic. I put up your website on the chat so that people can, both you and Margo, so that people can find your books and order them. And there's so many wonderful books between these two features to pick up. And that's a better thing to buy for a gift than lots of other things. So I hope that you will do that. We're going to start on the open mic, and it's very small today. So maybe you can read one more short poem than usual each. Our first reader is Marc Petrie. Marc, are you still there?
I needed to unmute.
Okay.
Okay, I'm gonna read two poems, but one poem, because we have a writer en Paris, c'est en français et en anglais, les deux langues. And this first poem actually is pretty interesting, Rick, because my family has a communal graveyard near Chauvigny, France, and it always freaks me out to think that all the relatives' bones after 50 or 60 years are thrown into a communal plot, and gives an idea to the temporal nature of our remains. All these poems are from my upcoming work for the Anthropocene, which will be published this month by Cold River Press. I'm extremely excited about it. Hopefully some of you guys might find it. I hope to do a group reading in the near future on Zoom, and I'll be publicizing that. My name on two tongues. Marc avec un C, un M qui chante, un accent sur R. C'était comment maman m'appelle. Le mot serpent sur ma langue. Comme la Vienne près de Chauvigny, à une chapelle où est la célèbre vêpre du matin. Doucement, j'entends mon nom à travers le toit cassé. Peut-être qu'elle encore l'entendra. And this is the poem in English. Mark with a C, a melodious M, an accent on R. That's how my mother spoke it. The word meanders on my tongue, like the Vienne near Chauvigny, to a chapel where she celebrated morning vespers. I whisper my name through the broken roof. Perhaps she will hear it. And this is the final poem from my upcoming book. I wrote it I wrote it exactly 1 year after I had near fatal heart failure. And I went to a place I was the same day and wrote this. It's called Redemption at the 18th Street Tower, January 22nd, 2024. A year ago, I sat on this lifeguard tower and journaled what could have been my last entry. That night, I suffered ventricular fibrillation, better known as heart failure. In the ambulance, I vaguely heard the EMT tell me my blood pressure reached 220 and my pulse was approaching 0 before he applied the paddles, which shocked my heart back to 130 beats a minute. The paramedics cheered, the Frankenstein lightning bolt, which revived me. I could only feel the after effects. A jolt burned through my skin, leaving large scars on my back. And here I sit. Here I am, basking in sunlight. Morning rain watched the sky, eternal azure. Clouds linger on an impalpable horizon. The outline of Catalina rises blue on the edge of the world, a world awash in light and life, alive. The rush of winter surf is at my ankles. A young boy chases gulls in the sand. A young woman in a sundress poses for photos beside the pier. I live part of the sparkling world, remembering my son playing with gulls, my wife walking me slowly, thankful for memories, thankful my eyes pick up the broad expanse of ocean, mixing with the ever-changing arc of the sky, thankful for my ears that hear the eternal roar of the waves breaking on the beach, even as the breeze whispers, someday this will all end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Please put the link to your new book up in the chat so people can see. Okay. Our next reader is David Oliveira.
Thank you. Thank you, Robbi. And thank you to the readers. It was very inspiring reading today. I have two poems. The first one is called The Wild Cherry Tree. It stood alone, growing on the canal bank, running the south border of grandfather's farm. Neither Avua nor his neighbors could say how or why it grew there, like none other around. I often walked the cow paths across the field from the milk barn to the yellow cherry tree, following the tree's progress from spring blossoms to their golden fruition at summer's end, sweetened by sunlight and youthful impatience. That was many years ago. I was a child. Schedules careless, every day echoed the last. Progress replaced the farm with housing projects. The canal filled in, the cherry tree cut down, the sugars moved into legend and romance, more succulent and sweeter in the telling. The world is seen through cracked windows, which explains why everything seems so blurry. Who has time to give them a thorough cleaning? There is beauty everywhere, not hard to find, but hard hanging on to for long aches of time. Earth never turns how we believe anyway. Views narrow, ears narrow, everyone gets tired. This poem is called Time. Webster's Collegiate Dictionary calls time the measured or measurable period during which an action, process, or conditions exist or continued. I'm not sure if they got it right, since I don't really understand what that says, nor know enough myself to make my own meaning. I prefer stubbornly persistent illusion. That was Einstein's thought, sent to Besso's family on his best friend's death. I still defer to Einstein, though I don't, in fact, grasp his words any better. Digging a hole in the garden, I discover an ancient hammerhead covered in rust and clay. There's no clue who lost it there, or how long ago, nor how many stories are encrusted in it. I hold time in my hands. My fingernail scrapes off a small flake of rust. A decade falls to the ground. I'm sure these past 10 years I haven't done enough. How much of my time am I given to squander? The question falls meaningless. We do what we do, and then we get on with it, whatever it is. Time makes me possible and unmakes me as well. It feels strange to realize I'll go out of life without knowing any more than when I came in. Not the first person to face this predicament. Bookshelves are filled with stories of time's fleet traffic, Even Shakespeare chimed in, what is past is prologue. I've seen enough of the past to see my future. Details are vague, but the destination's certain. I'm comforted that illusions are still something. Rainbows beautiful, though no arc hangs in the sky. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Our next reader is Marieta Maglas.
Hello, I have one poem published by Electromagnetic Golden Temples, published in Kingfisher Poetry Forum 2. Holy words to drive off raised thoughts, to cut some meanings, to pour down all the depths, and to warm our winter within. Bloom of life, to accompany old songs, hidden in new hymns, human misery and degradation, sufferings to rise up in the air of shrouded sanctums, self-bright sun to descend from a symbiotic sky every evening to make everything golden, the rivers, the rivers, the rivers, hopes to be carried home, to be eaten like gold, time to be broken, to be danced in its armor by hurricanes, by eternity, towards anarchy and chaos. Thank you.
Our next reader is Kate. You're still muted.
Hello, thank you. Am I still muted? No, I'm here. Yeah.
You're there. Yeah.
Okay, there's a screen. I'll clip it. Okay. Hello. My first poem, and thank you for allowing me to speak and share. I wrote this in honor of the gathering of people worldwide through Antigestan in Italy. There was a reading that was honoring the murder of Masha, and it was called Hair in the Wind, Women, Life, Freedom. One of the first times that the young men of Iran joined women in the streets in solidarity. Epigraph. To 13th century Iranian poet Sadi. Awake in the morning, Nowruz breeze is showering the garden with flowers. Epigraph, 14th century Iranian poet Hafez. The earth would die if the sun stopped kissing her. Wind follows us all. Sacred Euphrates and Tigris rivers of Iraq join Arvand Rud River in Iran. Rivers sing songs, the hearts hear. Wind has but one name. Lofty mountains, ancient forests reach above coastal Persian Gulf. Narrow Strait of Hormuz gave safety as we birthed into the Gulf of Oman. Water is life. As a child, I learned to run as fast as the wind. Others ahead of me, some lagged behind. Tumble and fall, begin again. The terrain has its own call. Sacred Persian gardens in all provinces, reflective pools, radiant architecture, skyward columns, artistic creations, extraordinary motifs. Attentive gardeners greet all visitors with the love of place and the love of each other. Oh, dream the statuesque cities, radiant architecture, skyward columns, artist creations, extraordinary tile motifs, culture to behold across distant villages of ancient people. Gahar Lakes, the largest in the world. UNESCO, history is woven everywhere. Oh, dream the visions of hope and peace. Always let the wind remind me what I ran from. Thank you. I have one other short poem. If there's time. Yes? Okay. Thank you. Winter dreams spring. Glaciers ice-packed polar freeze. Ice bear never hibernates. Winter's unfolding. Blizzard of her own will. When the cold wind doth blow, she's calling your name. Winter storm blasts deep snows. Everyone prepares in layers. Chill abounds, hunker down. Fire flames warm, melt frozen memories. Wind-blown icicles swept into curves. Lovely bare trees weaving captivity a trance. Branches twist and turn into dance. She invites romance. Plea for recovery to be cloaked in warmth. Winter is not long to stay. Strong north winds pound prairie and plains. River flow fury to the sea. Tree forked branches, bird nests remain. Architecturally sculpted, birdsong languages in refrain. Blink in an instant. She is mighty and fickle, sun-kissed skies, melt waterfalls, reservoirs, lakes, morning sunbeams strike treetops, glistening icicles had their chance. Last of springs, heavyweight snow, soaked clay soil, deeper she goes. Long days of Beltane, we will plant earth's renewal. Spring wills to stay. Unspoken message, gentle call, beauty surrounds us all. Spring returns her glory. Thank you.
Thank you, Kate, for coming. Jane McKinley.
Yes, thank you very much for the opportunity to read, and I'd like to thank all of the readers today for their beautiful poems. I'm going to read two poems from a series I've written about Anna Magdalena Bach, who was the second wife of the composer Johann Sebastian. Marriage with a purpose. Was it my lineage he chose? As if I were a black-pied cow and he a Holstein Friesian bull? Or what he called my good, clear soprano? Or was it love? Necessity? I never wanted the job, stepmother to 4. I was 20, an artist, singer to His Highness the Prince, earning more than my trumpeting father or brother. My husband, a widower, 36, was Kapellmeister, top musician at court. Do you blame me for my ambition? He wasn't taking any chances with his offspring, trumpeters on my father's side, organists on my mother's. He'd accounted for everything: ears, lungs, voice, tongue, facility of fingers and feet. Zweckehe, that's what we had, marriage with a purpose. The first year was bliss. We had money enough. I could sing. Was he counting on my wages when he spent a fifth of his salary on pails of Rhine wine to celebrate our wedding? In the second year, when the budget for music was cut, he sought a new post in Leipzig, a church job. No place for me. Women weren't allowed to sing. He was their third choice. I followed him in a stagecoach to Leipzig, encumbered by child and second thoughts, 4 wagons heaped with household goods. Darkness. 11 children in 12 years. 7 pine boxes. And every week, the birth of a new cantata, while I, in my fine hand, copied out parts. I bore 2 more daughters who lived past 5. The youngest was 8 when her father died, without a will. For day-old bread, I sold cantata parts to feed my daughters and myself. The older sons abandoned me, except for Karl, and he a stepson. In the end, when I'm committed, nameless with countless others to the earth, a critic will call me a splendid soprano who not once made use of her excellent talent in public. The second poem is about her son, Gottfried, who was the second born. Anna Magdalena on her son, Gottfried. The choir boys call him schwachsinnig, feeble-minded. But I ask you, is it weakness if a mind can parley music as its mother tongue, as if the child were begotten of angels? From the beginning, he took to music wie eine Forelle zu einem Bach, like a trout to a brook. His dimpled fingers swimming after his father's, upstream and down. His half-brother Karl said he showed a great genius which failed to develop. What held him back? Was it the fever, the one that seized his sister, that locked him in a place where words would howl to come in? Thank you.
Jane, thank you so much for that terrific work. I asked you in the chat whether you have a book that you would like to tell us about.
Well, I have a book called Mudman, which doesn't include those poems, that's coming out sometime soon, I hope soon, from Able Muse Press. And 3 of the Anna Magdalena poems will be coming out in the spring issue of the Southern Review. So,
Okay, well, we'll certainly look for it, and I hope to see you back here again.
thank you.
We do this not on the same day every month, but join me on my Facebook page and you'll get news of this for sure, or at the Verse Virtual website.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, I'm the last, and I'm going to read a couple of poems. I got news this week that Shanty Arts is going to publish my Phrastic book, About to Disappear. This poem I'm going to read, inspired by Rick's sharing of his ekphrastic poem, is the first poem in that book. So I'm going to share my screen so you can see the image. The image is called Watching Pins, and it's by an artist named Sal Taylor Kidd. The mind is always brewing something, tracing shape-shifting menageries in clouds. Any plain ingredient, flour, water, and a bit of yeast and salt, plus time, can rise to the occasion, becoming a new thing. So a handful of steel pins dropped on the table spurs the mind to summon forces far beyond itself. As sages once scanned the entrails of a bird, thrown sticks or tea leaves at the bottom of a cup for wisdom that could change a nation or affect a life. What emerges depends upon the mind at work. Maybe a strategy to solve a city's traffic woes, a way to plan political maneuvers, or a play in sports. Philosophy and science are full of sudden insights of this sort. Like Newton's apple, Archimedes bending over water, rising in a tub. The chemist Auguste Kekuli learned the benzene atom structure from the sudden vision of a snake swallowing its tail. In the pandemic, when the rules of ordinary life were all suspended and time became the most plentiful commodity, we could stare at nothing, like a cat intent on tracking birds outside the window. People looked back on their lives, hoping to mend old rifts, contacting former friends or enemies, the quarrels long forgotten. We changed, like dough rising at the back of a warm stove. Sequestered in our homes, we braided our loose threads into a pattern, wrote plays, made a family, discovered special gifts we didn't know we had, found power at the tips of our own fingers. It's one I did not throw away. And it was subsequently nominated by McQueen's for Best of Web, so wish me luck. The second poem I'm going to read you is called Alpha and Omega. The ocean reminds us of the border between this life and the unexpected next, which might be nothing, but could be a coral reef full of multicolored angels and blue-banded shrimp, a slow whale drifting overhead, casting shade over all this imagined brightness, like a misplaced continent or God in the Tanakh, creating everything perpetually, brooding over the waters. That might balance out the human effort to undo it all, plastic waste and leaky oil tankers, poison leaching from the fields. Years ago, I loved to walk by the black rocks, watching tiny hermit crabs and pink anemones rush headlong into each incoming wave to harvest whatever riches it might bring. Now they're gone. The sand left strangely bare. No vacant shells or fiddler crabs scuttling in the surf, one arm raised over their bodies like a beach umbrella. The birds must make a meal of bits that tourists toss in trash cans, filled to overflowing. A single flip-flop lies beside the bin, stranded invertebrate, tossed by fitful waves, falling and rising with their ancient plaintive music. Thank you so much for being here today. Does anyone have any questions for either of our features?
Hello?
Yes.
Yes, hi. Does Margo have a link to her books? I didn't see that.
In the website, you can find the link to the recent one, Neil Said the Night, and there's also a link on the website to the Glass Lyre book, Before the Drought, and also to the books from Sheep Meadow Press. And the new one hasn't come out yet, but it will.
And this is all on your website.
Yes,
Which
which is listed.
Yeah,
Great.
it was posted and I just posted it again.
Thank you, Robbi.
Thank you.
And
Anyone
thank you,
else?
Kate. Thank you.
Well, I don't have any questions, but I thank you both for being here, and you can unmute if you want, and I'm going to end the recording. If I can find. Oh dear, stop recording. There we go.